I remember when the fires at Yellowstone were taking place, and I remember seeing how many of our friends who were environmentalists said, "Let it burn, let it burn." And yet I remember seeing the carnage that took place with wildlife and the millions of animals who not only lost their home, but then would be thrust out in the cold as a result of the huge fire, when in fact I had learned from being an Eagle Scout, and the gentleman from Oregon is an Eagle Scout, we learned in our forestry merit badges that healthy forests are those where you can come in and clear out those things that were from years of use and come and clean the forest, and you could come and take sections so that you made sure that any fire did not destroy the whole thing. Would come and cut the forest and keep it healthy and work with Mother Nature and then replant. And then in the last 5 or 6 years, and you can look at any National Geographic or perhaps a Discovery Channel and see where the people, the companies that grow trees, they have healthy forests. And I think the healthiest forests are where private people and private companies own the trees as opposed to the government, because the government has a policy of ineffective, wasteful, and intrusive government in managing our forest.
You know,
yield back.
The other thing we learned as scouts, and like you say, we're both Eagle Scouts, that's always stuck with me when it comes to how we manage our resources, was a very simple line: leave your campsite better than you found it. That, I think, is a great guiding principle for those of us in this body, not only for natural resource policy, but for this country. Leave it better than you found it. And let me just suggest that we burned more than 8 million acres this year. 5.7 million acres, which is our new average that we're burning every year in this country, is an area larger than the entire state of New Jersey. You know, we throw these big numbers around in Washington. The bureaucrats do it all the time, and we do it from time to time. Think about every year you're burning an area of your national forests and grasslands and other areas larger than the size of the state of New Jersey. And yet, let me tell you what just happened in my district of Eastern Oregon. I have 70,000 square miles of terrific Eastern Oregon. 3 of the last mills have been put either on indefinite closure or closure in very remote areas where they're surrounded by overstocked forests that need all this work. And they're some of the last, if not the last, mills in these communities. 198 people in those 3 counties, in those 3 communities, have lost their jobs. That's 2.6% of non-farm payroll. Now, the state's economists, the certified smart economic folks, said, I wonder what that impact of those 198 jobs would be if it was spread over at 2.6% of non-farm payroll over the Portland metropolitan area. So a standard city in America. What do you think that would be? It would be the loss of 26,400 jobs. So all across the rural West, in small communities where the mills close, there's barely a yawn or a whimper in this Congress about what's happening. And yet, the prior Forest Service chiefs and the current one will tell you our country and our forests and our ability to manage those forests cannot be sustained if we lose the infrastructure to do the management. And that is precisely what's happening today for a lot of reasons, some of it market conditions. But part of the market conditions is an 80% reduction in the timber harvest on federal lands, an inability to go in and even clean up after a fire in less than 2 years on federal land. I was just out on the GW fire, not named for me, even though it's my initials. GW fire outside of Black Butte Ranch, Sisters, Oregon. Burned, I think, 7,000 acres, something like that, 8,000. Where the Forest Service had done thinning, the fire dropped to the ground, they put it out. Dropped to the ground, put it out. That's part of what we were trying to accomplish with our Healthy Forest Restoration Act that President Bush signed into law, that we as Republicans wrote with bipartisan help. The thinning project, where it dropped to the ground, and the trees are all green around it, was held up by the environmentalists for, let's say, 5 years in litigation from 2001 until I think 06. And finally the Forest Service prevailed, and they worked the sale. They thinned out this overstock stand, and fire hit it, and it went out, and the trees are still green. I think that's what Americans want, is us to manage, be good stewards of these lands and this resource. And to do what's happening today without reform is ineffective, it's wasteful, it's intrusive. 45% of the Forest Service budget today goes to fighting fire. It used to be 15%. 45% goes to fighting fire. A nearly like amount goes to paperwork to process the various activities they do rather than on the ground, improving habit, doing what they're trained to do. We tie them up in court and litigation and all this process and all this stuff. We've got to fix this problem. And if we do, when we passed the Forest Emergency Recovery and Research Act in the House last year by a big bipartisan margin, it would have generated, I think, $140 million over 10 years to the federal treasury in net new revenues. It would have helped pay for cleanup and restoration effort. I mean, we can do these things. But this leadership today, they voted against it, from the Speaker on down. And they put people in charge of the committees who were opposed to us every step of the way. And so I would tell my colleague from Texas, elections have consequences. And the changes are being played out today as more and more firefighters are called upon to put out these blazes. And cattle ranchers in eastern Oregon around the West are driven off their allotments, having to liquidate their herds. We're trying to get disaster help in when it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. We can work smarter. We can fix these problems. And in so doing, we can improve the environment. I mean, do you think this is great habitat for anything other than bugs and woodpeckers, which need habitat? I'm not downplaying that, but we've seen case after case. Colorado, the Hayman fire, where after that enormous fire that occurred there, the Denver watershed was deluged with mud and dead animal debris and dead fish as the runoff occurred. And we're always going to have fire. We can be smart, though, how we manage our forests so we can manage fire, get it back in balance with nature. And this Congress has held one hearing, taken no legislative action, zero, zip, zilch, let it burn, don't fix it afterwards, and we'll just get our imported wood from illegal logging and furniture from China. This doesn't make sense. It needs to change.
I thank the gentleman from Oregon who not only has persuasively brought forth arguments that he sees in his home state of Oregon, but also who amplified the Republican vision, smaller, smarter, common sense government, almost something you could find in a Scout handbook or a merit badge, versus the Democrat agenda, which is ineffective, wasteful, intrusive government, allowing not only for thousands of people to lose their job, but mismanagement of the natural resources that has been given to this great country that Lewis and Clark found out so much about, that we tout as not only the Teddy Roosevelt answer to the way America would be, but also how we're going to bring her on in the future. I want to thank the gentleman from Oregon not only for his time, for his dedication, but also for the things which he believes in.